When a self-proclaimed prophet claims a 16-year-old Carol Dennis as his bride, it's just the beginning of her hell on earth.
He brought in another wife, and he would have sex with her.
Those in power make their own rules, and escape is the only option.
He would say, "Don't ever leave. I will track you down, and I will kill you."
It's the late 60s in Owen Sound, Ontario. Carol Dennis's mom takes her to a new church founded by a charismatic Mormon minister.
Stan King told everyone that God had spoken to him and that this was his destiny, that he was to be the prophet.
And my mother got all interested in it and joined Stan's church, the Church of Jesus Christ Restored. And that's how it all started. I didn't know all the hidden secrets at that time. As Stan got to trust my mother a little bit, she was brought into that inner circle where some of these secrets were being shared. She said, "God has a special calling for you. He wants you to be Stan King's wife." I looked at her in disbelief. I said, "Well, he already has a wife. That's not possible." She said, "Well, this is what God wants." I just started crying hysterically. It was just revolting to me. I said, "He's old. He's double my age." I'd be 16, 17. From that point on, my life was sheer hell. My mother continued to manipulate me and work with me until eventually I gave up.
In 1971, when Carol is of legal age, she feels she has no choice but to move to Stan King's farm, where he has established a commune of about a dozen followers. Stan's legal wife, Erna, lives at the farm. Also part of Carol's new family are Stan and Erna's sons, Judd, Joe, and Fred, one of whom will be Stan's future heir.
They were around my age. I did like them. But Fred, he was the youngest son. He didn't really like everybody being there. It upset his world. And there was a resentment.
Carol has been saving herself for marriage.
I dreamed of the day that I would find the right fella and fall in love.
But now, she will be Stan's fourth wife.
A legal wife, you have the paperwork to go with it. A church wife, there's no paperwork involved. It's the sex act that makes you a spiritual wife. I was expected to sleep with the prophet, but I just could not do it. I would go to bed with my clothes on, and that went on for the longest time.
Finally, the day comes when the prophet grows tired of Carol's resistance.
I was ordered into the bed, and he was having sex with me, and that's all there was to it.
On July 2nd, 1977, Carol gives birth to a baby boy.
It was amazing. It brought me so much happiness, so much. And then 18 months after he was born, I had my second son. It gave me reason to live.
By 1986, Stan has 7 wives and 10 children when tragedy strikes.
One day, one of his wives phoned me and said, I think Stan has had a stroke. He wants you here now. And the last day came. I was with him and I did see him take his last breath and I felt his last heartbeat. Some years before, Stan said that Fred would take over his position, but I worried about Fred because I knew he didn't like me. When Fred took over, he kicked myself and my 2 sons out of the farm, and I was supposed to move with another church wife, Angie, and her children. It was a really big deal for my children, but at least the church wife thing would be over with. And I was looking forward to that part of it.
A year later, one of Carol's main assumptions about her new life is shattered.
It was conveyed to Angie to tell me that Fred would be taking over all the wives. And so I would be married to Fred. He showed up at my house and he said, "Take your pants off and get on the bed." And he had sex with me. I felt degraded. I found him revolting. He was considered my stepson and half-brother to my own children, but I had no choice. And I was in the same situation all over again. It was so depressing. Fred just didn't preach. He started pointing out how sinful everyone was. When chastisement started, you would just see every head in the room just immediately. If anyone ever intervened, they would be dead meat. Various people were physically assaulted. As a mother, seeing my sons assaulted, it just shattered me inside. I would think to myself horrible things about Fred, like, should I get his butcher knife and slit his throat?
5 years later, when Carol's eldest son is 30 years old, he wakes her up one day with some life-changing news.
He said, "I have someone picking me up and I'm leaving." I was shocked. He said, "I know you two are not ready to leave yet, but I just can't do it. I can't take anymore." So I stayed for my youngest son, but I couldn't quit crying. I was falling apart. I was in so much trouble because my eldest son left that my life was just even worse, if you can imagine that.
A year later, the pain becomes unbearable.
I made all the arrangements to leave, and a time was set. When my youngest son came home, he said to me, "I'm too afraid I will go to hell." I said, "He's going to kill me," but he didn't want me to leave. I said, "I love you," and grabbed my belongings. Everything I had in the world was in 2 garbage bags. My oldest son arrived with a vehicle, and I was out of there.
Carol has been with the cult for 37 years. It's all she's ever known.
Eventually, my oldest son and I landed back in Owen Sound, and we started a new life. I landed a job cleaning offices. Things were difficult. I didn't always have enough food. I had to walk everywhere. I worked all day and most evenings.
When I met Carol, I was a city councillor in Owen Sound. I was also doing some contract work at Bayshore Broadcasting. This lady named Carol started to appear at the radio station.
He introduced himself, and a friendship blossomed. he could make me laugh. And it really felt good to laugh because I had lost my sense of humor over the years. And our friendship grew into a romantic situation. It was the first time I had ever been in love.
3 or 4 months into our relationship, she decided to sit me down and tell me what her past was. When she finished that, she said, "If you decide to walk away, I will understand." And I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" And she said, "I want you to stay." And so, here we are.
And that's when I said, I'm tired of being a victim. I want to do something about Fred. He caused so much pain and agony. And that's when legal actions were started.
We filed a civil suit, which spelled out a number of abuses, including physical, sexual, financial, and psychological. And there was a price put on each of those things.
When I first met Fred, it just felt like I was in the presence of evil. His eyes were dead, and it occurred to me that this was one of the first times in his life that somebody was not really that intimidated by him.
Immediately following the interview, Fred's lawyer settles with one stipulation. Carol may not go public with the dollar value.
I was quite happy about it. It helped me out a lot.
The bank teller said it was the largest check she had ever deposited in her career.
A secret of sex, a dominating leader, young brides taking on faith.
10 was the youngest.
10.
He would scream, "If you leave this church, I will hunt you down and kill you."
Carol's bold choice to tell her story will have unexpected consequences.
As I first watched this on television, I was very surprised that this was happening right under our noses. I was anxious to get him into custody. First step was to go and meet Carol Christie.
The whole story is so bizarre that it is somewhat unbelievable, but they believed me.
Police also tracked down a few other cult escapees.
They told us a number of cases where they were physically beaten, assaulted, kicked, or the allegation of Fred grooming a very young girl, 11 to 13 years of age.
When Fred got wind of it all, he disappeared.
Weeks pass, and finally, there is a break in the investigation.
A license plate associated to Mr. King had been run by an officer in front of a motel.
Detective Ridgway sets up surveillance outside the motel.
And sure enough, Mr. King emerged from the motel room and went straight into the passenger side of the van. I got out of the police unit, opened the passenger side of the van, and I advised Mr. King that he was under arrest for assault.
Fred King pleads to 9 counts of assault, and on September 14th, 2016, he is sentenced to 18 months in prison.
When I heard Fred was actually going to jail, I rejoiced. I was happy, but not totally satisfied. He received 18 months, but he only had to serve 12 months in jail and go on his merry way. Still, I'm hoping the bringing attention to polygamy will help the whole situation. Polygamy is against the law and it needs to be enforced.
I think the generosity of Carol's spirit in terms of being able to share her story and to not just be a victim. She is a victim, but she's so much more than that. And that's inspiring.